We're back with the CR10, where today we're going to upgrade this one to dual Z lead screws. The CR10 is a pretty nice printer right out of the box, but I've noticed on my machine as it started to age, I see a lot of slop in the X-axis, where the wheels meet the aluminum extrusion on the non-lead screw side. Now you can adjust these wheels or just replace them altogether as they wear, which I have done, but I didn't get the results that I think I should have. So I thought the best idea would be grab a Z lead screw upgrade kit that's available from a lot of sellers now and just fix this problem once and for all. Before we go into upgrading this machine, let me show you a little more about the problems that I'm actually seeing. So I'm hooked up to this one via Pronterface just to show you what's going on. Let me walk you through this scenario. So let's say you've just finished a print and removed it from the bed. You can see that the X-axis is actually sloping down this way a little bit. Now that's fine if you've leveled your bed to that tilt. The print will come out okay. But what happens when you rehome this printer? So let's do that now. So when the gantry moved down and came to its home position, it actually leveled it out just a little bit. So that creates a situation where when this lead screw moves, it's going to move this side first, and this side won't move until it catches up and resumes that unlevel condition, which can lead to a lot of unpredictability. So I've marked both sides of the gantry so that you can see the progress as we move up. Now I'm going to move it up 1 millimeter at a time, and you can see what I'm talking about. So let's go to 1 millimeter. So half of the left mark is already gone at 1 millimeter, but you can still see most of the right one. Now let's go up 2 millimeters. So the left one is pretty much not visible at this point, but you can still see half of the right one. Let's go to 3 millimeters. Now the right one is almost gone. So that tells me that the tolerance is great enough that this axis can move almost 2 millimeters before this one starts moving. And that tolerance isn't tight enough to achieve the layer heights that you're going to want to achieve. So let's get to the upgrade. I have no idea what's going to be inside this box. I just bought a random kit off the internet. But let's see if we can get it installed and return this printer back to workhorse status like it should be. So let's see what we got. We got a Creality branded stepper motor and a coupler, some motor cable and some protective wrap, a lead screw that appears to be pretty straight, a top bearing mount, a motor mount, and the hardware we need to install it, and the additional mount that we need with the Z nut attached. So let's start by mounting the new Z motor. It can just rest on top of this extrusion, but I do recommend if you have this plastic decoration that you take these out and cut them down so that the Z motor can rest snugly on the extrusion and doesn't ride on this plastic. So let's mark those. We'll pull them out, and we'll just cut them down with a set of shears. That'll do, and we can just push them back in. Now with those cut down, the motor can set nice and snug on the extrusion itself. Now you can set your motor here, and you'll use that for a guide as to where to place your motor mount. Your motor mount is this yellow piece right here. It has 2 T-nuts on the back that fit inside the extrusion. So just slide it on the extrusion until it rests snug on top of the motor, and then you can spin these around to lock in the T-nuts. The T-nuts are locked in. Now we can put in the included screws through the top that will actually mount the motor to that plastic piece. Now the motor's nice and snug. The cable they gave me will hook these motors up in series. So basically it's going to hook this motor to the other Z motor before it heads to the control box. They did give me enough cable to run the motor plug out the back, and I'll just loop it around the outside of the printer, put some zip ties on it to keep it out of the way. Now we'll mount the extra Z-nut plate that they give us onto this carriage. It should be just like this side over here, but we will have to have some longer screws that they include in the kit that go through these wheels into this bracket, and we'll have to remove this whole bracket from the X carriage because you can't get to the backs of these screws from this side. So we'll move around to the front, and we're going to loosen up the belt tensioner on this side. Now we're to the back side again, and we'll remove this bracket from this X-beam. So we'll loosen up this screw and this screw. These all have T-nuts on the back that connect to the rails. Now you should be able to pull the X-beam out enough that you can slip this bracket up so that we can work on it. Now we'll remove these 3 nuts and wheels off the old bracket. There's one side, now we can remove it. And we'll remove these other 2 wheels. There's one. And now this bracket has been disassembled. Here's all the stock parts that came off the CR10. Now we're going to replace these 3 screws with 3 longer ones. And since we're adding this Z-nut bracket to the other side, we'll have to have 3 more collars for spacers on the other side of the wheel. So there's the 3 collars that are included in the kit. The plates will line up on the printer just like this. So let's go ahead and put these 2 wheels on first, and then we can slide this whole thing back on the printer. So we'll put the longer screw into the bracket that's included with the kit. We'll put one of the collars on, then one of the wheels on, then another collar, and then the new Z plate. Your Z nut is going to go to the outside. Then we can put the nylon lock nut on. Same for the bottom. Screw, collar, wheel, collar, plate, nylon lock nut. Now we'll put on this last wheel while it's on the printer. So we'll just slide this whole thing over the extrusion. Now we'll install the wheel on the other side. So we'll take the extra long bolt that came with the kit, we'll run it through. Then you want to add the eccentric nut that came with the printer. The flange side will go towards the front of the machine into this front bracket hole. Then put your wheel on, the new collar that came with the upgrade kit, then slide it over the front bracket, and then your nylon lock nut. Now you can just snug all 3 of these up. And now it should be moving pretty smooth on the extrusion, which it does. Now we need to find an Allen wrench that will fit in these 2 holes so that we can put the screws back on the X bar. So we'll slide the Z carriage down and pull the X bar out. Make sure the T-nuts slide into the extrusion. We'll spin back around to the front. Let's put our belt idler back on. We'll tighten up the X belt tensioner first before we snug up that bracket. The X belt's back on. Now we can tighten up the 2 screws that attach the old bracket to the X bar. Remember, you'll have to run through the new plate to be able to tighten those up. X bar's back on the bracket. Now we can go ahead and load our Z coupler on the motor. Remember, the set screws go to the flat side on the motor shaft. Let's go ahead and load our Z rod. I like the lead screw to actually sit on top of the motor shaft so there's no load on the coupler. I'm going to leave about a 5mm gap in between the coupler and the motor, and then we can snug our set screws up. And on the other side. Now to the top of the Z, we can go ahead and put the Z mount up here on top. It just has some T-nuts. It'll slide in this top rail and over the lead screw. You can go ahead and snug this for now, but I like to leave it a little loose and run the Z-axis up and down and let it decide where the Z rod should be. So it's on there for now, but we'll come back to that in a minute. Now we'll move on to the wiring. So as I mentioned before, they give you a cable that will hook this motor in serial to the existing motor and then onto the control box. So the cable they gave you, the longer end will hook to the new motor. Then it comes down to a Y that will hook in the old motor. And then at the end, you'll have the box connection that hooks onto the board. They also gave you a new Z in-stop wire because the current in-stop wire hooks into the existing Z motor cable. This wire set is more than long enough to wrap all the way around the outside of the printer to the old motor. So we'll start with plugging in the new motor to the wire harness that came with the kit. Then I'm going to run this portion on the outside of the extrusion and zip tie it along the way. Then I'll continue around the back and I'll run the wire underneath the printer and tuck it into the extrusion as much as I can. Again, securing it with zip ties. Then we'll continue on underneath the Y motor. As we round the corner, I'll go back to the outside of the extrusion, and we can remove our old Z motor cable and plug in our new Z motor cable. I'll go through and clean up these zip ties. Now to the front of the printer, we'll go ahead and remove the old Z in-stop wire. Now the old Z cable should be free from the printer. We'll plug in our new Z in-stop wire. There's the new in-stop wire. Now we can run our two new wire ends through the protective cover they gave us. Just a tip, if you have problems running your wire through this sleeving, 3mm nylon filament is your friend. Just run that from the other side and hook it onto the end of your wire. You can pull it through real easy. I also suggest capping the end that's going to go into the box with some heat shrink tubing. Heat shrink is on. Now we're going to open up the control box and hook up the wiring. Make sure you are not plugged into an outlet while you're working inside this box. So we'll flip it over. You'll need to remove these 5 screws. And once you're in there, you'll have to move these 4 screws up here on the top to slide the power supply out. Now we'll unhook the power supply. Carefully slide your power supply out. You don't want to mess up any of these cables. We'll lean it out this way, lift up a little bit. Now we'll remove the old Z in-stop cable. It's this one right here. They're pretty well marked. It does have a Z on it, so we'll pull that one out. And the old Z motor cable. It's the third one up, but again, they're pretty well marked. So we'll pull this one out right here. There is a zip tie that connects them all together right here that you'll have to clip. There's another zip tie right there. Let's go ahead and clip that. Then we should be able to just pull our Z wire loom through the back of the panel. Easy enough. The old one's out. We can snake our new one in just like the old one came out. And we'll just repeat the steps and hook it up. So new Z motor cable and new Z in-stop cable. We'll replace our zip ties, one back here and one up here. Zip ties have been replaced. Now just a quick look around to make sure that nothing's come unhooked. And we can put our power supply back in. Power supply is back on. Now we can put our bottom panel back on. And the bottom panel's back on. Now we'll get set up and plugged back in. We'll get into pronter face and connect up. Let's make sure our new motor is operating like it should. It appears to be turning successfully. Now let's run our Z almost all the way to the top to test it. Let's do G1 Z375. While it's moving to the top, make sure all the wheels are moving successfully and none of them are locked up. If some of the wheels weren't moving or this feels too loose or too tight, you can adjust this eccentric nut to bring it away from this extrusion and make it fit a little better. I told you before just to leave this top holder loose so we could adjust it after the fact. I want the lead screw to be able to adjust it left or right if it needs to as we move the axis up. If you'll notice, the rod is actually too far over this way. This is even flipped over the wrong way. I put it on upside down. So good thing we didn't snug it up. So we'll take it off. We'll flip it over the correct way. This relieved any pressure that was on the lead screw that was left or right. You can see now the lead screw is pretty much in the center of that extrusion. This is still loose. Now you can snug up the bolts. Now we're pretty much done with our install. I'd go ahead and come back through and snug up all these bolts. You don't want them too tight because that wheel does have to turn, but you don't want any slop in them either. Make sure your eccentric nut on this side fits well. There's absolutely no slop in this x-axis now. Go ahead and throw some grease on your new lead screw to keep it from chirping. The printer's heated up. Now we'll level the bed. Everything's leveled up. Now it's benchy time. Now that is a good looking benchy. And the dual lead screw upgrade on our CR10 is now complete. This was a great machine before, but now it's even better. For around $40 for one of these upgrade kits, you can't hardly pass it up if you have a CR10. If you found this video helpful, please consider giving it a thumbs up or subscribe to my channel. If not, leave your thoughts in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching. I couldn't resist it.